put this one up because I have an interest in flooding and in fenlands and drainage, and I did a big study down the River Don to the northern fen, this great wetland of South Yorkshire. The clue, I'm doing a lot with the community in Fish Lake because of the flooding, and the clue is in the name, Fish Lake. It was 100 square miles of inland sea, effectively, by 1600. When I was doing the study for the lost fens and the forgotten fens, I talked to lots of different groups. And what was interesting was that up to the 1950s, all the way along the River Rother and the River Don, everyone had boats, because they knew they were going to get flooded 5 or 6 times a year. And it was only after the 50s that people thought we'd engineered a solution. We didn't want boats. And people said, oh yeah, I thought Grandad was bonkers. But yeah, that's why I had a boat. So, summary would be increasing climate change impacts affecting extreme weather events and consequent flood risk. Water management in flood-prone catchments is hugely influenced by land use change over the last 300 years. It's changed dramatically. Alongside hard engineered defences, it is essential to understand and harness the potential of natural water management in the landscape to alleviate risk. So that's where I'm kind of coming from. Problems, that's near where I live, underwater, the River Rother. Moors and bogs used to extend right across the landscape. Land enclosure intensive farming, industry and urban development, houses, infrastructure, etc. Rivers have been straightened, canalised and culverted, floodland drained, removed and developed. And that landscape extended from the high tops right the way down to the lowlands. Water should be held in a great sphagnum bog sponge in the uplands and then in wetlands and flood meadows down throughout the entire catchment. That is how it was up to 300 years ago. Instead, today it rushes off the drain, damaged and shrunken peat bogs, races downstream without anywhere to hold it back, and there's a cumulative effect growing in magnitude as the flood moves down the catchment. Flood protection for properties upstream, if it causes water to move faster through the system, inevitably exacerbates the low catchment problems. It may not be the critical factor, but it certainly is not helping. Our responses need to be more joined up, and at present they're not. So from the moors to the shores, the extent and scale of new developments is very obvious, plus the intensive nature of arable farmland. All intensively drained. And the public don't understand that when you see a green landscape, that's drained as well. Read the Victorian accounts, read the 1700s accounts. Every field that you look at is under-drained, and it's drained around the edges, the invisible hedges and things of the lowlands. It's all incredibly intensively drained. There's much new infrastructure. Go down the M18, past Doncaster. Huge, huge warehouses with not a green roof in sight, no water harvesting, no solar panels, no wind turbines, and all these new developments. They're all contributing to the problem. Huge amounts of new roadways, of housing, of industry, commercial development, hard surfaces that shed water quickly and have massive footprints of land taken from the floodplains. There's a big debate after 2013, and on one of the TV debates, they had, I don't know, it was probably the president of the British House Builders Federation. And he said, well, I don't know what all the problem is, because we wouldn't build on a floodplain. We really wouldn't. But there's all this flat land in the lowlands. That's great for building on. Yes, I'm an idiot. So we need to track the water down, what's downstream from headwaters to the Don catchment, to the extensive floodplains of the Great Northern Fen as the water gathers momentum until it spews out across its once natural floodland. And we can read accounts of this in the 1500s and 1600s. And since then, we've exacerbated the problem. Extreme weather manifesting climate change make the events more intensive and more frequent. Once extreme weather events are more commonplace. And I've talked about, I did this in 2007 with the floods, and people say, oh no, you. And I said, look, this isn't the end of it. It's a bit like Churchill. This isn't the end. This isn't even the beginning at the end. This is the end of the beginning. You're going to get more and more. And so, oh no, this is a 1 in 500. This will never happen again. Engineering solutions are only part of the answer, and in some cases they can make things worse in the long term. And history tells us that engineering schemes ultimately failing again and again. And even Vermeulen, the famous Dutch drainage engineer, in many places made things worse. Places that had never flooded before suddenly started flooding. And then some of the schemes collapsed completely. We need to slow the flow, make space for water in an increasingly populated landscape, and we find that difficult to do. It's politically not something that they're prepared to buy into, but they need to think about it. This is the Great Northern Fen. These are the lowland areas. This is the River Humber Estuary. Massive, massive lowland. And I'll not dwell on this, but some of you have picked up the free book, which shows some of the drainage schemes put in. Sir Cornelius Vermeulen died in poverty after the Civil War, but he's kind of blamed for all the drainage. And actually, he started it. He started the big drainage schemes in the mid-1600s, but there are people like John Smeet, Leeds drainage engineer, who polished them all off. A whole series of people came along in the 1800s with individual parliamentary acts for drainage, and they did a mopping up operation. We have one of the oldest maps in England of the Great Inklesmoor, and that's Thorn Moors, the middle there, the Humber Estuary. These whirlpools don't exist. These are cartographers who didn't know what to do when they got to the edge of the map. Swirly, swirly. It's not really a whirlpool. And this map was actually fantastic, because this was actually drawn up to map out the medieval rights of Turberry, a local monastery, so their rights for peat cutting and what money they can make. But this area is described in the 1600s as a rendezvous of ye waters of ye rivers, constantly inundated, about 100 square miles. And this is the Thorn Mere. This is England's biggest natural, or Northern England's biggest natural water body, and it disappears in the early 1600s, part of the drainage. And here we have the Royal Hunt, with about 100 boats carrying the royal princes, to slaughter the red deer, which have stood at bay in the lake. And you slit the throats, and then you carry them to the bank and slit the throats there. And we tried to work out where this lake was, and it's gone. It's like Whittlesea Mere. In Cambridgeshire, this huge area of wetland, a map of the Great Level. When I first saw that, I was just blown away. This is because I was a teenage bird watcher, went to find some wetland sites, and they're nice, but they're a bit small. And then you find out there's these huge areas of wetland, and they're here in the 1600s, and I wanted to know what's happened to them, where have they gone? So that's Whittlesea Mere, it disappears. And that was a tiny bit of, Whittlesea Mere was a lake in the middle of that Great Level. And they used to have regular regattas, sporting events every year. And it survives, Whittlesea survives long enough to be documented by the Victorians, so we have images, and it's drained in about 1850. And you can see they're converted to intensive arable. And what you're doing, you're pumping water. Draining in the upland, as Chris will know, draining in the upland is easy. You just cut a ditch down the hill and the water drains off. In the lowlands it's more problematic. You have to have economic and political control, and you have to be able to drain. Often there's no fall, and you have to pump the water out. If it's a peat fen, the peat shrinks, the water comes the wrong way. So you're trying to pump it. But eventually we get on top of that. Wind pumps, and then field drains and wind pumps, and then drainage within the field. Every bit of land is drained, desiccated. And the consequence is the soil then blows away. We've done this case study in the Don, and you can look at the contours, you can see why the whole area in the lowlands gets absolutely wet. We looked at ecosystem services, detailed more in the paper, and you can see here going down through Sheffield, this huge great peat mass, most of which is now gone. And the other thing, that was the Thorn Mere. And one of the great things of the drainage was we moved entire rivers in the landscape. The Don was taken north to the Ouse rather than south to the Trent. Massive, massive changes, and that's compromised the ecosystem service delivery. And when these things fail, this is Cambridgeshire in 1947, but we've got similar things from Fish Lake just the other month, and it is catastrophic, and it's horrible for communities. People don't want to know, people don't want to be exposed to that. This is the river, I tried to explain when I go abroad, this is not the River Don, this is the main road through the Don Valley in 2007. And it cost over £3 billion to deal with the aftermath of all that. Absolutely horrible. We need to undo some of the catastrophic changes. We need to re-establish the upland peat bogs, allow woodland, especially shadow woods, back up the hill, allow the sphagnum bogs further down the hill, block or rip agricultural drains in peripheral marginal lands, renature strained, canalised and culverted streams and rivers. We need to make space for water, hold water back throughout the catchment. We need to recreate some of the lowland wetlands like Potterick Card in South Yorkshire. Used to be 100 square miles of inland sea, and we're putting back, a few bits. We need to be much, much more ambitious. All new developments should be water positive, not just the ones in flood risk areas. Where does the water and flood come from? The surrounding land. Everything should be water positive. It will be quite easy to put that into planning, not just the floodplains. We need beavers. People talk about beavers. And I'll put this in at the end because I usually use this as a bit of a throwaway because I do invasive species and non-native species. And the beaver is interesting because it's a native species that's come back. Without beavers and wild boars, you do not have a natural woodland. And they're both coming back. And I say, well, people get really upset about beavers. And I remember seeing one of the beavers in the southwest of England escaped from its area where it's fenced in, and the headline in the local newspaper was, "Wild beaver runs amok." And I used to joke to students and I said, well, what's he going to do? He's going to gnaw your knees at worst. No, and the other day I looked at I was doing research, wanted a picture of a beaver, and I found this headline in the Daily Telegraph, "Man killed by beaver." And there's an angler in Eastern Europe who was fishing, and a beaver bit him twice on the leg in its 7th artery, and he died. So I said, that's going to do a great PR exercise for the reintroduction of beavers, isn't it? So we need to think creatively, we need to think more holistically, we need to rewild the river and its catchment. This needs to be hand in hand with targeted engineering approaches to deal with the immediate need for protection. The impacts on people are horrific and are unacceptable. Natural solutions will take time, but they are long-term viable, and the two go hand in hand. We need to work with farmers and landowners as a solution, not the problem. Our rewilding conferences now, we're getting individual farmers who want to get involved, coming with their own volition, and we're getting big estates coming. Last year we had 10 big landed estates, not just the forester, not just the estate manager, but the actual owners as well, wanting to find out about new alternatives. So, some immediate thoughts. For impacts, we need to stop or reduce moorland burns. We need to drastically reduce upland grazing impacts, which have been horrific. We need targeted tree planting in some areas. Tree planting is not the total solution. It's only when you can't get natural regeneration that you really want to resort to actual planting. So it's better, in my view, to release the natural processes. Thank you.